want to talk a little bit about some of the things that we did with this flute. This was a challenging instrument to make, and double flutes are always challenging. Very rarely do they go together in such a way that everything just works perfect. Most often I have to go in and I have to tweak things here and tweak them there and whatnot, because wood moves, it changes. And so when you lock two pieces of wood together, then you got to take into account the fact that the wood can change. It can actually move one direction or another. And if you look at the instrument, you can see that this tube bends a little bit down and the top tube bends a little bit up. And that happened, of course, after we had bored the flutes. The stress that was in the wood was changed, and so the wood ended up moving over a period of a couple of days. And this is what happened. So to join them, normally I space a double flute out with 1.25 inch space between the two flutes. 1.25 inch tends to be about the right amount for a person to be able to finger the bottom flute and yet still keep the two instruments close enough together to be able to make them ergonomically good and solid. And so we knew that the tubes had bent the directions that they had bent. And so when joining them, I actually ended up making these two saddles are the same basic dimension. I call these spacers between the two flutes saddles, but it made the distance down here at this tube quite a bit different than these two. So I had to make a new saddle for down here. So we got them all joined together. Very complex and challenging to do, but I love the way it looks. I love the whole thing about it. And then it's got the easy clean mouthpiece on it. And up until this instrument, when I made an easy clean mouthpiece, I made it with two pieces of metal. One was in the body of the flute and one in the mouthpiece. And they sleeve together in an airtight sleeve. The problem is this. Number one, that it's a tight fit. Number two is that getting the tube and that metal inside the mouthpiece on both of the flutes, getting all of that aligned properly so everything is in perfect alignment is extremely difficult to do and takes an incredible amount of time. I think in joining this particular flute, I believe it took us 1.5 days to get this all joined together, which is not uncommon for a double flute. And so once we got it all joined together, it fit really super tight. And that night, the flute moved a little bit. And when it moved, the mouthpiece ended up being super loose, almost to the point that it would fall off if you tipped it upside down. Very frustrating that here I worked so hard to get that fit as good as possible, where it was loose enough that it didn't take an incredible amount of strength to put it on and off, and yet where it was tight enough to provide the air tightness that we needed for the instrument. Years ago, when I first started doing easy clean mouthpieces, I tried several different ways of doing it. The tubes has been so far the most successful methodology. Prior to that, I use cork for doing joinery, like easy clean joints. And the cork worked okay, but the problem is if a person doesn't keep it up greased really well, then it wears out and it has to be replaced. And so there's some maintenance issues that can be involved with that. And at one point, I even used O-rings. But O-rings in wood, it would fit great one day, and the next day it just didn't fit good. And so it was very, these things were challenging. So Pablo and I were talking about the fit of his mouthpiece and trying to figure out what we would do to make the fit proper. And he lives back east where the humidity is quite different, so the odds of this flute moving when he gets home are fairly high. It's probably going to move a little bit. So we needed something that had some forgiveness in it to allow for any movement that the wood might make in the future, and yet still allow for an easy fit and for an airtight fit. It's a complex problem. And Pablo asked about using O-rings. And I said, well, I used to do that, Pablo. That was one of the first ways I did easy clean mouthpieces. I said, but it had a whole host of issues that were challenging. And then I realized if we take that old idea of using O-rings and combine that with metal tubes, it might just give me the stability that I need for the O-rings to work, and the O-rings provide some elasticity so that we have forgiveness of movement and yet can maintain that air tightness. And I believe this is what we will do from now on Easy Clean mouthpieces, particularly for double flutes. So we got 2 pieces of African blackwood coming out of the mouthpiece, and there's 2 O-rings on that. Now, these O-rings still need to be greased. They need to have cork grease put on them so that they don't wear out prematurely. But if you look here inside the flute body, you've got the 2 brass tubes that go into the flute body. And it worked super. We actually, you saw a video perhaps a few days ago with another double flute made out of water rose. And that flute originally had metal tubes for it. But the flute, when I would play that flute, I felt like there was an air leak happening in the flute. And that most likely was coming from the tubes one way or another. And so I ended up redoing that mouthpiece actually before we did Pablo's, and it fixed it completely, and it works fabulously. And finally I'm going to be able to send that flute to our client. And I'm super excited for him to get it because it plays so good. So that is the new design for Woodsounds Easy Clean mouthpiece. It works extremely well. There is a bit of maintenance on this in that you want to put cork grease on them. You can use chapstick, any kind of lip ointment will work. Look how beautiful this thing is. My goodness. I love it. So the way our Woodsounds double flutes work is we use straps on the bottom flute to cover the holes. The bottom flute is literally a second flute. So you have the 2 flutes that are joined together. It's one of the challenges with them because really if you're buying a double flute, you're looking at buying 2 instruments. And then also the cost of getting them all joined together properly. And so they can get expensive pretty quick. In the shop, it takes more time for me to join a flute than it does to make another instrument, like Woodsounds Classic, a Cedar Classic, or Fruitwood Classic. So it really can be an expensive thing to get a double flute. And I wish it wasn't that way. I wish that we could make double flutes and that they were more cost effective, but I also wish that they didn't take as much time to make because it is what it is. But I freaking love them. I freaking love them. Oh, the fun thing about them is you can play one hand on top and one on bottom. And oh, it is delightful. Oh, goodness. Amazing. Absolutely amazing. This flute's called Connection because that is what it's all about. Deeper connections with others, with nature, with your music, and with yourself. I hope you're having a wonderful day. God bless.
Whether you're dreaming of your first native flute or wanting to create some custom instrument, Woodsounds is where your dreams can be made real. My name is Brent Haynes, and you can reach me at 801-822-1415 or brent@woodsounds.com. Have a great day.